"Any last words?" Barber Trenton asked into the microphone, his voice booming across the ballroom, packed with Manhattan elite. The 500 guests erupted in laughter, clutching their champagne flutes, as if watching an old man being humiliated was the height of entertainment. I stood there in the center of the blinding spotlight, wearing a suit that was 20 years out of style, clutching a broom they had handed me as a prop. My son-in-law looked down at me from his podium, a cruel grin stretching across his face, confident that he was the king of the world tonight. He thought he was looking at Leonard Graves, the broke senile barber from the Bronx. He had no idea he was staring into the eyes of the Undertaker. I did not stutter, I did not cry. I simply reached into my inner jacket pocket. Trenton laughed harder, thinking I was reaching for a handkerchief to wipe away my tears. Instead, I pulled out a leather wallet and flipped it open. The gold badge of the Federal Bureau of Investigation caught the stage lights shimmering like a blade. The laughter in the room died instantly, choked off, as if someone had sucked the oxygen out of the air. Trenton turned pale, his grin vanishing. My phone began to ring loudly through the silent room, amplifying the voice of the FBI director on speakerphone. "Start praying, Trenton," I whispered, "because God is the only one who can help you now." Before we continue this story, please let me know where you are watching from. In the comments below, hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to someone who underestimated your worth. My barbershop has smelled the same for 40 years. A mix of old talcum powder, cheap aftershave, and the dust of 1,000 conversations. It is not much, just 3 chairs and a cracked linoleum floor on the corner of 42nd Street in the Bronx. But it is honest work, or at least that is the cover I have maintained since I retired from the bureau. This shop was my sanctuary until yesterday, when the door chime rang and the devil walked in wearing a $5,000 Italian suit. Trenton Dillard, my son-in-law, looked at my shop the way a man looks at something. He stepped in on the sidewalk. He did not say hello. Instead, he pulled a silk handkerchief from his pocket and covered his nose as if the smell of hard work was toxic to his delicate senses. I was sweeping hair from the floor, just finishing up with old Mr. Henderson. Trenton kicked the pile of hair with his polished Oxford shoe, scattering it back across the clean floor. "I just swept that," I said, leaning on my broom, hoping he would not see my hands tighten. Trenton ignored me, tossing a thick cream-colored envelope onto the counter. It landed right next to my jar of barbicide. "The annual gala for the Dillard Hedge Fund is tomorrow night," he said without making eye contact. "You are coming." I looked at the invitation, gold-embossed lettering on heavy cardstock. I did not reach for it. "Why would you want a barber at a black tie event?" Trenton I asked. He laughed, a short, sharp bark of a sound that had no humor in it. "It is all about optics. Leo, the media loves a rags to riches story. I need to show them where I came from, or at least where my wife came from. You are the prop, Leo. You are the before picture to my after picture." He walked over to my station and ran a finger along the worn leather of my barber chair, checking for dust. "You represent the poverty I lifted Julia out of. Investors eat that stuff up. It makes them feel charitable. So you are not inviting me because we are family?" I asked, knowing the answer. He turned to me, his face hardening. "Look, let us be real. You are an embarrassment. Leo, you live in a shoebox, you cut hair for pocket change, and you drive a car that should be in a scrapyard. But tomorrow night, I need you to play the part of the grateful, poor father-in-law. Do not wear that suit you wore to the wedding. The mothball smell made my partners gag. Wear your work clothes. Bring your smock. Actually, bring your broom too. It adds a nice touch of authenticity," I felt. The anger rising in my chest, a cold, familiar heat that I had not felt since my days undercover in the MOM. But I pushed it down. The mission was not over yet. I needed to see how far he would go. "I am not a clown for your circus." "Trenton," I said quietly. Trenton stepped closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document, slamming it down on top of the invitation. Sign this, it is a non-disclosure agreement. It says you cannot speak to any of the investors, you cannot ask for money, and you definitely cannot tell anyone about that little gambling debt of yours that I paid off last year. I stared at him. That debt was a lie, a fabrication. He had told Julia to explain why money was missing from their joint account, money he had actually siphoned into an offshore account. I picked up the pen. My hand remained steady. Sign it, old man, Trenton hissed, or I will have this building condemned by the end of the week. I know the city zoning commissioner, and I know for a fact your wiring is not up to code. I signed it not because I was scared, but because I needed to get inside that gala. Trenton smiled, snatching the paperback. Then he picked up the invitation from the counter, crumpled it into a ball, and tossed it into the trash can, filled with sweepings and hair. Oops, he said, smirking. You can fish that out, right? You are used to digging through trash. I waited until the door closed behind him, until his Porsche roared away down the street. Only then did I reach into the bin and retrieve the crumpled ball of paper. I smoothed it out on the counter. My face was calm, but inside the operative was waking up. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The gray hair, the wrinkles, the stooped posture. It was a perfect disguise tomorrow night. Trenton wanted a show. I decided I would give him one he would never forget. The Grand Monarch Hotel is a fortress of glass and steel in the center of Manhattan, a place where a cup of coffee costs more than a haircut at my shop. I arrived at the main entrance precisely at 7:00. I had refused to wear my barber smock. Instead, I wore my charcoal suit. It was 20 years old, but I had pressed it myself and shined my shoes until they looked decent. I walked toward the revolving doors, head held high. The doorman, a giant of a man with an earpiece, stepped in front of me, blocking my path. His hand landed heavy on my chest. Delivery entrance is around the back, Pop. He grunted, not even looking at my face. I am a guest, I said, keeping my voice level. I have an invitation. The guard looked me up and down, analyzing my fraying cuffs and the scuff on my briefcase. I doubt that. Move along before I call the cops to haul you away for loitering. Just then, a stretch limousine pulled up behind me. My daughter Julia stepped out, looking like a movie star in a shimmering red gown, but her eyes were terrified. She saw me being manhandled by the guard, and for a second I thought she would rush over. But then Trenton stepped out behind her. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that looked possessive rather than affectionate, and whispered something in her ear. Julia looked down at the pavement and walked past me without a word. That hurt more than the guard's grip on my arm. Trenton, however, stopped. He walked over to us, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Is there a problem here, officer? He asked. The guard straightened up. Mr. Dillard. I am sorry. This homeless man was just bothering the guests. I will get rid of him. Trenton laughed, shaking his head. No, let him in. He is with me. The guard looked confused. You are serious, sir? Look at him. Trenton patted my cheek with a patronizing tap that made my combat instincts twitch. He is my father-in-law. He looks like a bum because he is one. But the family is family, right? Let him in. But officer, do not let him use the main entrance. He might scare the investors. Send him through the kitchen. The guard smirked and grabbed my arm tighter, shoving me toward a side alley. You heard Mr. Dillard, kitchen entrance. Move it. The service hallway was a chaotic assault on the senses. Steam hissed from giant dishwashers. Chefs shouted orders in 3 languages, and waiters sprinted back and forth carrying trays of caviar and lobster that cost more than my rent. I walked through the heat and noise, my dignity stripped away layer by layer. I saw trays of half-eaten filet mignon being scraped into the garbage waste that could feed my entire neighborhood back in the Bronx. Finally, I emerged into the ballroom. The transition was jarring. Silence and air conditioning hit me. The room was a sea of tuxedos and designer dresses, heavy with the scent of perfume and money. I found my table, table 99. It was not a table. It was a single chair placed near the swinging kitchen doors right next to the bathroom. Every time a waiter burst through with a tray, the door would hit the back of my chair. But I sat there back straight, observing I was not looking at the centerpieces I was counting, the security detail. 12 men, mostly ex-military, judging by their stance. I scanned the VIP section, and that is when I saw them. Sitting at the front table laughing with Trenton were not bankers. They were men I recognized from the FB. My most wanted watch list: Ivan Petrov, the Russian arms dealer, and Marcus Thorne, the money launderer for the cartel. Trenton wasn't just a greedy banker, he was washing blood money. My son-in-law was not just a jerk, he was a criminal, and he had just invited the only man who could take him down right into the lion's den. The lights dimmed and a hush fell over the crowd. A spotlight hit the stage and Trenton walked out, arms raised, soaking in the applause like a messiah. He spoke for 20 minutes about growth margins and future projections, using buzzwords that meant nothing, while the screen behind him flashed graphs that I knew were falsified. Then his tone changed. He put on a somber face, a mask of fake humility. "But tonight is not just about success," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "It is about remembering where we come from. My wife, Julia, is the love of my life, but she came from humble beginnings. Very humble." He paused for dramatic effect, and I saw Julia shrink in her seat, wishing she could disappear. And tonight, we have her father here with us. "Leonard, could you please come up to the stage?" The spotlight swung around the room, blinding me. The crowd murmured, looking around for the important man. Instead, the light landed on me, the old man sitting by the kitchen door, smelling like dishwater. "Come on up." "Leo." Trenton beckoned, waving his hand dismissively. "Do not be shy, folks. Give him a hand." I stood up, my legs felt heavy, but I walked. The long walk to the stage felt like walking the Green Mile. Hundreds of eyes bored into me, judging my suit, my hair, my very existence. I climbed the stairs and stood next to Trenton. He looked tall and golden. I looked small and gray. He put an arm around my shoulder, squeezing hard enough to bruise. "Ladies and gentlemen," Trenton said, into the mic, "this man is a barber. He has cut hair for 40 years, standing on his feet all day. And do you know what he asked me last week? He came to my office crying, asking for a loan to pay his electric bill." A ripple of sympathetic laughter went through the room. I felt my blood turn to ice. That was a lie. I had never asked him for a dime, but I stayed silent, keeping my face impassive, collecting the intel. Trenton continued, shaking his head sadly. "It broke my heart, but it also reminded me why I work so hard. I work hard so that people like Leo do not have to starve. So today, in honor of my father-in-law, the Dillard Fund is pledging $1 million to help the homeless veterans of this city." The crowd erupted in applause, cheering for Trenton. As generosity. It was a beautiful lie. Trenton turned to me, pulling a crisp $100 bill from his pocket. He folded it and stuffed it into the breast pocket of my suit, right next to my heart. "Here you go, Leo," he said, his voice amplified by the speakers. "Buy yourself a nice dinner tonight." "On me, go on, take it. You need it more than I do." The audience laughed again, a cruel, mocking sound. Trenton leaned in close to me, away from the mic, so only I could hear. "Now get off my stage, you old leech. You have served your purpose." I looked at the crowd cheering for the monster. I looked at the criminals in the front row, smiling at their partner. I looked at Julia, hiding her face in her hands. And then I looked at Trenton. My internal clock ticked down. The time for observation was over. The operative was active. I did not move toward the stairs. Instead, I reached into my pocket, slowly, deliberately. Trenton watched me, confused, expecting me to pull out a thank you note, or maybe a tissue to wipe my eyes. He had no idea I was about to burn his entire world to the ground. "Enjoy the applause, kid," I thought to myself, "because it is the last time you will ever hear it." The morning sun filtered through the cracked blinds of my barber shop, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Like tiny memories, I stood there for a moment, holding my ceramic mug of black coffee, just breathing in the scent of barbicide and old leather. This place was not just a business. It was a time capsule. On the wall hung a framed photo of my wife taken 3 days before the diagnosis that eventually took her. In the corner sat the booster seat I used for my grandson, before Trenton stopped letting him visit. It was quiet, peaceful even. The humiliation of the gala the night before felt like a bad dream, something far away. But peace in my life has always been the calm before the storm. My coffee mug suddenly rattled on the counter, sending a dark ripple across the liquid. At first I thought it was the subway train passing underground, but the vibration grew stronger, shaking the scissors in the jar of blue disinfectant. Then came the sound. A low mechanical growl that deepened into a supple roar of diesel engines, heavy gears, and grinding metal. I walked to the window and my heart stopped. A massive yellow bulldozer sat idling on the curb, its steel blade gleaming in the sunlight like a guillotine. Behind it, a black SUV pulled up and 4 men stepped out. They were not construction workers. They were wearing high-visibility vests, but they moved like predators. Their biceps bulged against the fabric and their eyes were hidden behind dark sunglasses. The door to my shop burst open without a knock. The lead man was a giant with a scar running through his eyebrow, holding a clipboard like a weapon. He did not look at me, he looked at the walls, the chairs, the mirrors, assessing how quickly they could be destroyed. "You need to clear out, Pop," he said, his voice sounding like gravel in a mixer. "We have a demolition order, effective immediately. You have 10 minutes to grab your personal items before we start tearing this structural hazard down." I placed my coffee mug down slowly, my hand steady. Despite the rage boiling in my gut, "I have a lease," I said, keeping my voice low and controlled. "I have paid my rent through the end of the year. You cannot just walk in here and—" The giant stepped forward, invading my personal space, smelling of stale tobacco and aggression. "Your lease was terminated at 9 this morning. The building has been condemned. Structural instability, electrical hazards, rat infestation. Take your pick. The owner wants it leveled to make way for a parking lot. Now move or be moved." I knew this tactic. It was a squeeze play. Trenton was not waiting for legal proceedings. He was using brute force, knowing I did not have the money or the lawyers to stop him. I stood my ground, blocking the path to the back room, where my equipment was stored, where my Glock 19 was hidden beneath the floorboards. "I am not leaving," I said. My voice dropped an octave, the tone of a man who has interrogated terrorists in black sites. But to this thug, I was just a stubborn old man. The giant laughed and signaled to his crew. "Grab the old man gently. We do not want a lawsuit, just get him out of the way." 2 of the men moved in. They were faster than typical construction workers. Hired muscle mercenaries, possibly off-duty, cops on a private payroll. One of them reached for my arm. I let him grab me. My instincts screamed at me to react. In my mind, I saw the move perfectly. Grab the wrist. Twist 45 degrees, snap the radius, sweep the leg, drive the elbow into the temple. It would take 3 seconds to incapacitate both of them. 3 seconds to end this threat. But I did not move. The Undertaker wanted to fight, but Leonard the Barber had to take the beating. If I fought back now, if I revealed the lethal set of skills I had honed over 30 years, the game would be over. Trenton would know I was not just a helpless old man. He would go underground, and I would lose my chance to expose the entire network. So I went limp. I let the thug shove me backward. I stumbled my hip, slamming hard into the metal armrest of the barber chair. Pain shot down my leg, a sharp electric jolt. "Oops," the giant said, mocking me. "Careful there, Pop. You are fragile." He picked up a glass jar of combs and dropped it casually onto the floor. The glass shattered, sending shards skittering across the linoleum. "That is a safety hazard, see? This place is dangerous, please," I said, injecting a tremor into my voice that I did not feel. That is my property. Stop this. One of the men grabbed my collar and dragged me toward the door. I struggled feebly, playing the part, grabbing onto the doorframe. The rough wood dug into my palms. The giant stepped in close and delivered a short, sharp punch to my ribs. It was a professional hit, hidden from the view of the street, just enough to knock the wind out of me. I crumpled to the floor, gasping for air, tasting blood where I had bitten my lip. The metallic taste was familiar. It tasted like patience while I was on my knees, gasping, clutching my side. The giant pulled out a smartphone. He tapped the screen and held it up in front of my face. The screen brightness was high, blinding me for a second before my eyes focused on the face of Trenton Dillard. He was sitting in his corner office sipping a green smoothie, looking fresh and untouched by the chaos he had unleashed. "Good morning." Leo Trenton chirped, his voice tinny through the phone speakers. "You look a little rough. Did you trip?" I looked up at the screen, blood trickling down my chin, staring into his soulless eyes. "I told you to sell," Trenton said, his voice hardening, losing the fake cheerfulness. "But you had to be stubborn. You had to cling to this rat hole like it mattered. Look at you now, kneeling in the dirt where you belong. Do you see that bulldozer outside? That is reality. Leo, that is the future, coming to crush the past. You cannot do this." I wheezed, forcing the words out. "I am already doing it." Trenton smiled, showing his perfect white teeth. "Power is not just money, Leo. Power is the ability to rewrite history. Power is the ability to bulldoze your pathetic little memories in 5 minutes and replace them with something profitable by noon. This place will be rubble. By dinner time, no one will remember you were ever here. Consider this mercy. I am freeing you from your delusions." Trenton nodded to the giant. "Finish it." The call ended. The screen went black. The giant pocketed the phone and looked down at me with a sneer. "You heard the boss. Time to go." He grabbed me by the back of my jacket and hauled me to my feet, forcing me out onto the sidewalk. The bright sunlight hit my eyes, blinding me. I stumbled and fell onto the concrete, scraping my palms. The neighbors were watching now. Mrs. Rodriguez from the bakery covered her mouth in horror. The young kid from the newsstand looked away, terrified. Behind me, the engine of the bulldozer revved up. Black smoke belched into the air. The giant waved his hand and the machine lurched forward. The steel blade crunched into the front window of my shop. The sound was agonizing. The shattering of glass. The splintering of wood. The groan of the building giving way. It sounded like bones breaking. I sat on the curb, wiping the blood from my lip, watching my life being dismantled. The sign that said Leonard's Barber Shop fell with a crash, snapped in half by the metal tracks. The chair where I had given my grandson his first haircut was crushed under the weight of the machine. The floorboards protecting my secret cache were being buried under tons of debris. Most men would have wept seeing their livelihood destroyed. Most men would have felt broken, defeated by the overwhelming display of power and violence. And I let my shoulders slump. I let my head hang low so the thugs would see a broken old man. But hidden behind the curtain of my gray hair, my eyes were dry and my pulse was steady. Trenton thought he was burying me. He thought he was erasing Leonard Graves. But as the dust rose from the ruins of my shop, choking the air and coating my bloody suit, I felt something click into place inside my mind. The hesitation was gone. The cover was blown, not by me, but by him. He had just destroyed the only thing keeping me tethered to a peaceful life. He had destroyed the cage and let the animal out. Trenton Dillard wanted to see power. He had no idea what kind of power he had just unleashed. The barber was gone. The Undertaker had risen from the rubble, and I knew exactly where to start digging for the graves I would need to fill. I dusted the drywall powder off my shoulder and limped toward the train station. My head was throbbing where the demolition crew had struck me, and my left leg dragged slightly, but pain was just information. It told me I was still alive. The bulldozer had taken my shop, but it had not taken my resolve. I needed to check on the one thing Trenton held hostage that was more valuable than any building. My daughter Julia, her house, or rather, Trenton's house, was a sprawling glass structure in the Hamptons, designed to look like an Apple store rather than a home cold, sterile, and devoid of warmth. I did not knock. I knew the code to the service entrance because Julia had given it to me 6 months ago in case of emergencies. I let myself in the air. Inside smelled of expensive lilies and fear. I found her in the master bedroom. She was not crying. Crying takes energy she did not have. She was frantically stuffing clothes into a Louis Vuitton duffel bag. Her movements were jerky, uncoordinated like a bird, hitting a window pane. On the bed lay a stack of cash bound in rubber bands and her passport open to the photo page. "Julia," I said softly, closing the door behind me. She spun around, gasping, dropping a silk blouse onto the floor. When she saw it was me, her shoulders slumped, but her eyes remained wide, terrified. "Dad, you should not be here. He is coming back early. The market closed down and he is furious about something. He said he lost a secured line." I walked over to her, ignoring the throbbing in my ribs. I looked at the bag, then at the passport. "You are running." "I have to," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "I cannot do it anymore, Dad. He is suffocating me. He tracks my phone. He checks the mileage on the car. Last night, after the gala, She stopped. She pulled her cardigan tighter around herself, instinctively, protecting her left arm. "Show me," I said. It was not a request. It was a command from the days when I led teams into hostile territory. Julia shook her head, stepping back. "No, it is nothing. I just bumped into the doorframe." "Show me, Julia." She hesitated, then slowly peeled back the sleeve of her cashmere sweater. The bruise was ugly, a deep purple and black contusion shaped like fingers gripping a bicep. It was fresh, likely from this morning. It was not just a bruise, it was a message of ownership. My blood ran cold. The father in me wanted to hunt Trenton down and end him right then and there, but the operative in me took over, analyzing the injury, calculating the force used, assessing the threat level. "He did this because you asked about the offshore accounts." "Didn't he?" I asked. She nodded, tears finally spilling over. I saw a notification on his iPad. A transfer to the Cayman Islands. I just asked him why we were moving money. When he said the fund was stable, he grabbed me. He said I was spying on him. He said, the sound of the front door opening downstairs cut her off. The electronic chime echoed through the silent house like a gunshot. Julia froze. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a wax statue. "He is here," she mouthed. "Hide." I did not hide. I picked up the passport and the cash and shoved them under the mattress. Then I sat down in the armchair by the window just as heavy footsteps thudded up the stairs. Trenton did not walk like a man coming home to his family. He walked like a warden inspecting his prison. The bedroom door swung open. Trenton stood there, loosening his tie. His face was flushed red, likely from scotch and rage. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed. "Well, isn't this a family reunion?" he sneered. He looked at Julia, then at me, then at the open duffel bag on the bed. A dark amusement curled his lip. "Going somewhere, honey, or were you just packing for a charity drive?" Julia stammered, her hands trembling. I was just organizing the closet." Trenton walked into the room, kicking the door shut behind him. He ignored me completely, focusing his predator gaze on my daughter. "Do not lie to me, Julia. You are terrible at it. You get that from your mother, wake nervous, always looking for an exit." He reached out and grabbed her arm right over the bruise. Julia flinched, letting out a small whimper. Trenton released her and turned to me finally, acknowledging my existence. "I see you survived the demolition. Leo, you are like a cockroach, resilient but disgusting. I assume you are here to beg for money, since your shop is now a pile of kindling." I stood up slowly. My knee protested, but I kept my face impassive. "I am here to take my daughter to dinner." Trenton laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Dinner? You cannot afford a Happy Meal, and Julia is not going anywhere. She is not well. Look at her, Leo. She is shaking. She is hysterical." I stepped forward, placing myself between him and her. "She is shaking because you hurt her." Trenton. I saw the bruise. Trenton's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, dead stare. She bruises easily, she is clumsy. And honestly, Leo, who are the police going to believe a respected hedge fund manager who donates millions to the Police Benevolent Association, or a senile barber who just got evicted, and a woman with a documented history of anxiety? He walked over to the nightstand and picked up a bottle of prescription pills, rattling it violently. See? This, doctor. Sterling prescribed these for her anxiety, but she does not take them. She thinks people are watching her. She thinks her husband is a criminal. Sounds like paranoia, doesn't it? Sounds like she needs a rest, a long rest. He turned to Julia, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm whisper. I have already made the calls, Julia. The sanctuary at Pine Hills. They have a lovely room available. Maximum security. No phones, no visitors. Just quiet time for you to get your head straight. If you try to leave this house, if you try to take one step out that door without me, I will have you committed involuntarily. You will be medicated until you do not even remember your own name, do you understand? Julia collapsed onto the bed, sobbing silently, defeated. The threat was real. Trenton had the money and the connections to make her disappear into the mental health system. It was the ultimate checkmate, or so he thought. Trenton checked his Rolex. I have a conference call in 10 minutes. Leo, get out. If you are not gone by the time I come back downstairs, I will have you arrested for trespassing. He walked out, leaving the door open, confident in his total victory. I waited until I heard his office door click shut downstairs, then I moved. I sat next to Julia on the bed. She was rocking back and forth, murmuring, I cannot leave, I cannot leave. I grabbed her shoulders, turning her to face me. I did not use my father voice, I used my handler voice, the voice I used to turn terrified informants into steel-spined assets. Julia, look at me. She looked up, her eyes swimming in panic. Listen to me very carefully, I whispered, urgency, giving weight to every syllable. You are not crazy. He is gaslighting you. It is a tactic used to break prisoners, and he is using it on you because he is afraid. Afraid, she choked out. He is not afraid of anything. He owns everything. No, I said, shaking my head. He is terrified. He is moving money because the walls are closing in. The bruise on your arm is not a sign of his strength. It is a sign of his loss of control. He struck you because you got too close to the truth. I reached under the mattress and pulled out the passport. I put it in my pocket, not hers. You cannot run tonight. Julia, if you run, he will find you at the airport. He will drag you back, and he will lock you away, just like he said. Your escape plan is sloppy, and he knows it. Then what do I do? She wept. I cannot stay here. You are going to stay, I said firmly. But you are not staying as his victim. You are staying as my eyes and ears. She blinked, confusion cutting through the fear. What I leaned in close, my lips inches from her ear. Do you remember the game we used to play when you were little? The invisible girl. How you could sneak into the kitchen and steal a cookie without me seeing you, she nodded, a faint memory surfacing. We are playing that game again, but for real stakes, I need you to be the actress of your life. I need you to take those pills he gives you and flush them down the toilet, but pretend you swallowed them. I need you to act submissive, act broken, let him believe he has won, let him get careless, and while he is careless, I need you to find the password to his private server. I cannot, Dad. I am scared. Fear is fuel, I told her, pressing her hand hard. Fear keeps you sharp. You are not helpless. You are the daughter of Leonard Graves, and you are stronger than you know. Tonight, you are not a wife. You are an operative. You are undercover in your own house. Can you do that for me? Can you do that for Mom? The mention of her mother sparked something in her eyes. A tiny flame of anger amidst the ocean of terror. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, taking a shuddering breath. The password, she whispered. He changes it every week. Then find it. I said, I will be watching. I will be close. If he touches you again, if he raises a hand, you signal me. Turn the porch light on and off 3 times. If you do that, I will come through that door, and nothing on this earth will stop me from ending him. Do you understand? She nodded slowly, her spine straightened just a fraction. The sobbing stopped. Now unpack the bag, I commanded. Put the clothes back exactly where they were. Leave no trace, he cannot know. You were ready to leave. He has to think you have accepted your fate. Julia stood up. She moved mechanically, but her hands were steady. She began hanging the clothes back up, erasing the evidence of her rebellion. I walked to the door and looked back at her. She looked small in that giant room. But she no longer looked like a victim. She looked like a soldier waiting for orders. I love you, Dad, she whispered. Focus on the mission, Julia. I said, my voice breaking just slightly. I will see you on the other side. I walked out of the room and down the stairs, past Trenton I.'s office, where I could hear him laughing on the phone, boasting about his ruthless efficiency. He thought he had crushed us. He thought he had broken the old barber and the fragile wife. He did not know that he had just inadvertently recruited the most dangerous asset in the world against himself. He had weaponized his own family, and the countdown to his destruction had just begun. The smell of gasoline is distinct. It does not smell like a spill at a service station. It smells sharp, chemical, and aggressive, like a promise of violence. I woke up not to the sound of an alarm, but to that smell drifting under the gap of the back room door. I had been sleeping in the storage closet of my condemned shop, guarding the ruins, sleeping on a cot with one eye open. The bulldozer had taken the front, but the skeleton of the building remained, and I knew Trenton would not stop at partial destruction. He wanted erasure. I sat up in the darkness, my heart rate barely elevating. Fear is a reaction for the unprepared. I was not unprepared. I had been waiting for this. I checked my watch, 2:14 a.m., the witching hour for cowards and arsonists. Then came the sound, glass shattering. Not the heavy crunch of the bulldozer, but the high-pitched tinkling of a bottle breaking against the back wall, followed immediately by the heavy whoosh of air being sucked into a vacuum as the accelerant ignited. The temperature in the room spiked instantly. The orange glow seeped under the doorframe, turning the darkness into a flickering hellscape. I did not panic. Panic burns oxygen, and I needed every breath. I rolled off the cot and stayed low, pressing my chest against the cool linoleum floor. Smoke was already curling in, thick and black, swirling like ink in water. I crawled toward the door, touching the handle with the back of my hand. It was warm but not searing. I grabbed my towel from the hook and soaked it in the bucket of water I kept for shaving and wrapped it around my face. Most people run away from fire. It is a primal instinct surviving millions of years of evolution. You see fire, you run, but I could not run, not yet, beneath the floorboards. Exactly 3 feet from the north wall under the shelf, where I used to keep the extra shampoo bottles, was my life. Not my life as a barber, but my life as a man who could end wars, the black box. If I left it, the fire might destroy the cash and the passports. Inside, but the gun. The gun was made of Austrian polymer and steel. It would survive. And when the fire investigators sifted through the ashes, they would find a weapon that officially did not exist, linked to ballistics, from operations that were redacted from every government file. If they found that box, Trenton wins. If they found that box, I go to a black site prison for the rest of my life. I had to go into the fire. I kicked the door open. A wall of heat hit me like a physical blow, singeing the hair on my arms. The back room was already engulfed. The flames were climbing the curtains, licking the ceiling paint, which peeled and blackened in seconds. The smoke was a living thing, choking, blinding, stinging my eyes until tears streamed down my face, mixing with the soot. I dropped to my stomach, crawling army style. The air was clearer down here, but the heat was oppressive. It felt like being inside an oven set to broil. I could hear the structure groaning, the wooden beams weakened by the bulldozer. Earlier were now screaming as the fire ate through them. I had maybe 2 minutes before the roof came down. I reached the spot. The floorboards were hot to the touch. The linoleum had bubbled and melted, sticking to my palms like hot tar. I ignored the pain. Pain is just a signal. I gritted my teeth and dug my fingers into the gap I had cut. Years ago, I pulled. The wood groaned, resisting. The fire roared louder, as if angry that I was stealing its prize. "Come on," I growled, swallowing a mouthful of smoke. With a snap, the board gave way. I reached into the dark hole. My hand brushed against cool metal. The lockbox, it was heavy steel, reinforced fire, resistant but not fireproof forever. I grabbed the handle and hauled it out. The metal seared my skin, but I held on. A beam crashed down behind me, sending a shower of sparks cascading over my back. My jacket caught fire. I rolled onto my back, smothering the flames against the wet floor, clutching the box to my chest. Like a newborn child, I coughed violently, my lungs burning. The smoke was thick now, a solid wall of gray death. I could not see the door. I relied on memory. 3 paces forward. Turn left, 5 paces to the emergency exit. I crawled, dragging the heavy box. The heat was unbearable. My skin felt tight, dry as parchment. I could feel the blisters forming on my hands. My vision tunneled, darkening at the edges. I reached the rear exit. It was jammed. The heat had warped the metal frame. I kicked it once, weak from lack of oxygen. Nothing. I kicked it again, putting my hip into it, screaming with the effort. The door shuddered. One last time, I thought. Do it or die here. I coiled my legs, bracing against the wall, and drove both feet into the push bar with every ounce of strength left in my 69-year-old body. The door flew open. I tumbled out into the alleyway, gasping, sucking in the cool night air, falling onto the wet pavement, rain hitting my face like a blessing. I dragged myself and the box behind a dumpster, just as the roof of the barber shop collapsed. The sound was deafening, a thunderclap of destruction. Sparks shot up into the night sky, illuminating the alley. For a brief second, I saw a black sedan parked at the end of the block lights, off engine running. The arsonists watching their work, making sure the rat was dead. I lay in the shadows, pressing my back against the brick wall, breathing steadily, forcing my heart rate down. The fire trucks were coming. I could hear the sirens wailing in the distance, but they were too late. The shop was gone, my history was gone. Leonard the barber was dead, burned to ash in that inferno. But the man sitting behind the dumpster was not Leonard. I looked at my hands. They were black with soot, red with burns, and shaking slightly from the adrenaline dump. I wiped them on my ruined pants. I reached for the box. It was still hot. I dialed the combination on the mechanical lock. Left to 32, right to 15, left to 88, click. The lid sprang open. Inside, resting in cut foam, was my past and my future, a Glock 19 Gen 3. Matte black, slide stripped of all serial numbers. A suppressor. 3 magazines loaded with hollow points, and a satellite phone heavy and brick-like. I did not touch the phone yet first. The weapon, I picked up the slide. It felt cool, solid, real. The weight of it was familiar, comforting. It fit into my hand better than the barber shears ever did. I picked up the frame. I slid the barrel into place. The metallic click, as I reassembled the weapon, was the only sound in the alley. Louder to me than the sirens, it was a ritual, a prayer. I racked the slide dry, firing once toward the burning building. Click. The action was smooth. Perfect. I loaded a magazine, slap rack ready. The weapon was alive, and so was I. I took a rag from the box and wiped the soot from my face. I used the reflection in the glossy back of the phone to check my eyes. They were red-rimmed, bloodshot, but the softness was gone. The grandfatherly twinkle was extinguished. What stared back at me were the eyes of the Undertaker, cold, flat, and devoid of mercy. Trenton Dillard thought he was burning a building. He thought he was destroying a legacy. He thought he was cutting the strings of a puppet. He did not realize that fire cleanses. Fire reveals the steel underneath the rust. I picked up the satellite phone. I extended the antenna, pointing it toward the southern sky, waiting for the signal bars to appear. 1 bar, 2 bars. Encrypted connection established. I dialed a number I had not called in 10 years. It rang twice. Director S. Secure line. A voice answered gruffly. It was late in D.C., but he never slept. Status, I said. My voice was raspy from the smoke, but steady. There was a pause on the other end. A long, heavy silence, then the voice changed, losing its bureaucratic edge. Who is this? It is the man who buried the bodies in Belgrade, I said. It is the man who ghosted the cartel in Juarez. Am cashing in the chip, Hartman. Leo, the director. As voice breathed out disbelief. We thought you were dead, or worse. Domestic, I am not domestic. Anymore, I said. Looking at the flames consuming the last of my shop, I have a situation. A target entrenched in high finance moving capital for foreign hostiles. And he just made it personal. What do you need? Leo, a team, extraction, no. I said, racking the slide of the Glock one more time just to hear the sound. I do not need a team, I need authorization, and I need you to keep the local police off my back for 48 hours, and the target. Trenton Dillard, I said. The name tasted like ash in my mouth. Hartman hesitated. Dillard, the hedge fund guy. He is untouchable, Leo. He has senators in his pocket. Nobody is untouchable, I said, standing up. The pain in my leg was gone, masked by pure focus. I am going to dismantle him, Hartman. Brick by brick, dollar by dollar, and when I am done, there will not be enough of him left to fill a prison cell. I hung up before he could argue. I slipped the phone into my pocket and tucked the Glock into the waistband of my spine. I buttoned my scorched jacket, hiding the weapon. I stepped out from behind the dumpster. The black sedan was still there at the end of the block. The window rolled down, and I saw the glow of a cigarette. The arsonist waiting for confirmation. I walked toward them. I did not limp, I did not hunch. I walked with the predatory grace of an apex hunter moving through the tall grass. They saw an old man emerging from the smoke, a victim, a survivor. They were wrong. I was not a survivor. I was the consequence. As I walked into the darkness, leaving the burning wreckage of my life behind, I felt a strange sense of gratitude toward Trenton. He had stripped away the lies, he had burned away the disguise. He had wanted a war, now he was going to get one. And as I disappeared into the shadows of the Bronx night, I promised myself one thing. When this was over, the only thing Trenton Dillard would be cutting was deals with the prosecutor. And the only thing I would be cutting was the ribbon on his grave. The city at 4 a.m. belongs to two types of people, predators and prey. For 30 years, I hunted the predators, and for the last 10, I had been hiding among the prey. But tonight, I was back in the food chain, and I was not the one running scared. I needed intel, but I could not use a computer. Computers leave footprints, digital searches trigger algorithms, and Trenton Dillard had the kind of money that buys sophisticated cybersecurity monitoring. If I typed his name into a database, a red flag would pop up on a server in a basement somewhere, and his security team would know I was alive. No, I had to go analog. I had to go back to the streets where data is traded in whispers and cash, not binary code. My first stop was a rusted green newsstand on the corner of Lexington and 42nd. The owner was a man named Benny. Benny had been selling papers on that corner since the Reagan administration. He had cataracts in both eyes and walked with a cane, but Benny heard everything. He was the central nervous system of the street-level information trade. I pulled my collar up against the morning chill and approached the stand. Benny was stacking the early editions of the Post, his hands moving by muscle memory. I placed a specific combination of coins on the metal counter. 2 quarters, 1 dime, and 3 pennies arranged in a triangle. It was an old bureau signal from the 90s. A code that meant, I need a meeting, and I need it clean. Benny froze. His hands hovered over the stack of papers. He did not look up, he did not ask who was there. He just slid a copy of the racing form across the counter, page 4. He wheezed, his voice sounding like sandpaper, rubbing against stone. Third race, horse number 7. I picked up the paper. It was not about a horse race, it was a location code. The third race at Belmont meant the third booth at the old diner on 10th Avenue. Horse number 7 meant 7 a.m. I tapped the counter twice, a sign of gratitude, and vanished back into the fog. At 7 a.m. I was sitting in the back booth of the Greasy Spoon Diner, clutching a mug of coffee that tasted like battery acid. Across from me sat a man who looked like a homeless vagrant. His coat was held together with duct tape and his beard was matted. But this man was Marcus, formerly known as the Abacus. Marcus used to be the forensic accountant for the Gambino crime family before he turned state witness and then fell off the wagon. He had a mind like a steel trap for numbers, and despite his appearance, he still ran the numbers game for the entire Lower East Side. "You look like hell," Leo Marcus muttered, staring at my soot-stained jacket. "I heard you got roasted last night." "News travels fast," I said, sliding a packet of sugar across the table. Underneath the sugar packet was a folded $100 bill. It was the last of my cash reserves until I could access my emergency stash. Marcus palmed the bill with the dexterity of a magician. "Trenton Dillard," I said, keeping my voice low, barely moving my lips. "I need to know where the water flows. Not the official accounts, the drain pipes." Marcus stirred his coffee, staring into the black liquid. "Dillard is slippery. He uses shell companies nested inside other shell companies. It is a Russian nesting doll of fraud, but he is arrogant. He thinks nobody looks at the physical manifests anymore. He thinks everything is in the cloud." I leaned in, listening. The cloud can be hacked. The cloud can be deleted. Paper cannot be deleted. Not if you know where to look. Marcus tapped the side of his nose. "There is a courier service, a legitimate front called Blue Horizon Logistics. They run documents from the financial district to a private airfield in Teterboro twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays." Today is Friday. I checked my watch. It was 7:15 a.m. The courier would be moving soon. "What is on the plane, Marcus?" "Not on the plane," Marcus corrected. "In the pilot's flight bag, hard copies, ledgers. The Russians do not trust the internet. They want physical signatures for the weapons deals." Dillard signs the manifests confirming the money has been washed, and then the pilot flies them to the holding company headquarters. "Where is the headquarters?" Marcus smiled, revealing a row of yellow teeth, the Cayman Islands. "But not just any bank, it is a private vault run by the cartel. If you can get the flight logs or the manifest from today, you will have his signature next to the serial numbers of illegal anti-aircraft missiles." I stood up, dropping a few dollars on the table for the coffee. "You are a lifesaver." "Marcus, stay dead." "Leo." Marcus whispered as I turned to leave. "If they catch you this time, they won't just burn your shop, they will peel you apart." I left the diner and headed for my next contact. I needed to intercept that courier, but I could not do it alone. I needed eyes on the ground. I headed to the financial district, to a shoeshine stand tucked away in the lobby of the building where Trenton had his offices. The shoeshine man was a giant named Silas. Silas had been an informant for me during the RICO trials in the 90s. He polished the shoes of the most powerful men in the city, and while they sat in his chair reading the Wall Street Journal, they talked. They talked on their phones. They talked to their assistants, and they ignored the man at their feet, treating him like furniture. Silas heard everything. I sat down in the chair. Silas looked up, and his eyes widened slightly. He recognized me immediately, despite the grime on my face. He snapped his polishing rag, a sharp crack that echoed in the marble lobby. "Shine, sir?" Silas asked, loud enough for the security guard to hear. "Just a buff," I said. Placing my scuffed shoe on the brass rest, Silas went to work applying wax with rhythmic precision. As he worked, he spoke in a low murmur barely audible over the squeak of the leather. Your boy is nervous, Silas said, referring to Trenton. He came down here an hour ago. He was sweating through his shirt. He was yelling at someone on a burner phone. What did he say? I asked. Staring straight ahead, he said the package has to go today, no delays. He said the clean accounts are drying up, and he needs the Cayman injection by Monday. He is meeting the courier at the service entrance in 20 minutes. The service entrance, it was the same place he had forced me to enter the night before. The irony was not lost on me. Trenton was using the entrance for the poor to smuggle the wealth of the rich. I need to know who the courier is, I whispered. Silas buffed the toe of my shoe to a mirror shine guy in a blue windbreaker, carrying a bike messenger bag. But he is not on a bike, he is in a black sedan, waiting in the alley. I reached into my pocket to pay him, but Silas stopped my hand. No charge for you, Mr. Graves. You got me off the hook in '98. Just take this guy down. He is a bad tipper. I walked out of the lobby and circled the building to the service alleyway. It was narrow, shadowed by the towering skyscrapers blocking out the sun. I blended into a doorway, pressing myself against the brick, waiting. I was not a barber anymore. I was a shadow. 10 minutes later, the service door opened. Trenton stepped out. He looked terrible. His tie was loose, and he kept looking over his shoulder. He was holding a thick manila envelope sealed with red tape. A black sedan pulled up. A young man in a blue windbreaker got out. He looked like a college student, an intern nobody would suspect. But I saw the bulge under his armpit. He was packing heat. Trenton handed over the envelope. Make sure this gets to the pilot personally, Trenton hissed. Do not stop for coffee. Do not stop for gas. Straight to Teterboro. Got it, Mr. Dillard. The courier took the envelope and tossed it onto the passenger seat. I watched them interact, memorizing the license plate, memorizing the courier's face, but I did not intervene yet. An arrest here would be messy. Trenton would claim the envelope was just business contracts. I needed more. I needed to know exactly where in the Caymans that money was going. I needed the account codes, which Marcus said, would be in the manifest. The courier drove off. Trenton wiped his forehead with a handkerchief and went back inside. I stepped out of the shadows. I had the license plate. I had the destination. But I needed a way to get close to that plane without flashing a badge. I could not call the local cops. Trenton owned them. I needed a way in that was invisible. I walked to a payphone on the corner. Yes, they still exist if you know where to look in the old neighborhoods. I dialed a number for a bar in Queens called the Iron Horse. The owner was a woman named Elena. She was the widow of a smuggler I had arrested, but she respected the game. She also ran a catering service for private jets, Elena, I said. When she picked up, it is the Undertaker. There was a pause. You are dead, Leo. I saw it on the news. The fire. I am a hard man to kill, Elena. I need a favor. You service the private hangars at Teterboro, right? Yeah. We have a delivery going out at noon. Why? I need a uniform, I said. And I need to be the one driving that van. You are asking for trouble, Leo. I am asking for justice, Elena. Fine. Come to the back door in an hour. But Leo, if you get caught, I do not know you. I hung up the phone. The pieces were falling into place. The newsstand gave me the time. The accountant gave me the method. The shoe shine gave me the target. And now the bar owner was giving me the access. I looked at my reflection in the glass of the phone booth. I looked tired. I looked old. But beneath the fatigue, I felt the cold precision of the job. Taking down a hedge fund manager was not so different from taking down a mob boss. You just had to find the one thread that unraveled the whole sweater. And that thread was flying to the Cayman Islands in 2 hours. I started walking toward the subway station. My limp was gone, the pain was gone. There was only the mission. I was going to turn Trenton's own network against him. He thought he was playing chess, but he did not realize he was playing against a man who had already memorized every possible move on the board. The money was flowing to the Caymans, but the truth was coming home with me. The Emerald Hills Golf Club was not a place for sport. It was a place where the laws of the United States were treated as optional suggestions and where the fate of economies was decided over a handicap of 12. The grass was a manicured carpet of unnatural green maintained by an army of invisible laborers, and the air smelled of expensive fertilizer and even more expensive scotch. I adjusted the strap of the heavy leather golf bag on my shoulder, feeling the weight dig into my muscle. The white caddy jumpsuit was 2 sizes too big for me, making me look frail and shrunken, which was exactly the point. In my line of work, being underestimated is the ultimate camouflage. I pulled the white cap lower over my eyes, hiding the intensity of my gaze behind the brim. I had secured this position through the catering contact. Elena, who knew the caddy master, a bribe of $500 from my emergency fund, bought me a badge with the name Earl printed on it. Earl was a ghost, a man on the payroll who never showed up. Today I was Earl, and I was carrying the clubs of a man named Dmitry Volkov, known in intelligence circles as the Siberian Volkov, was the money behind Trenton's operation. He was 6 feet 4 inches of pure malice wrapped in a bespoke polo shirt, and his golf swing was violent, like he was trying to hurt the ball rather than hit it. Trenton was walking beside him, looking small and nervous, despite his confident stride. He was laughing too loud at Volkov's jokes, desperate to please the man who held his financial leash. I walked 5 paces behind them, keeping my head down, staring at their shoes. Volkov was wearing limited edition alligator skin golf shoes, worth more than my barbershop. Trenton was wearing spikes that looked brand new, never scuffed by actual work. We reached the 9th hole, a par 4 that doglegged around a water hazard. Volkov sliced his drive, sending the ball into the rough near the mud bank. He cursed in Russian, a string of obscenities that would make a sailor blush. Trenton immediately jumped in, blaming the wind, blaming the sun, blaming everything but the Russian's terrible form. I walked ahead into the tall grass to find the ball. My heart was hammering a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. In my pocket, hidden inside a roll of athletic tape, was a listening device the size of a grain of rice. It was a prototype from the Bureau, capable of picking up a whisper from 50 feet away and transmitting it through encrypted cellular networks. But to work, it had to be close. It had to be on the target. I found the ball sitting in a patch of wet mud. I signaled to them. Volkov stomped over his face, red with exertion and irritation. Trenton followed him, wiping sweat from his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief. "Beat him," Trenton said, pointing at the ball. "Use the 7-iron, Dmitry. You can clear the hazard." Volkov ignored him, staring at his shoes. He had stepped into the mud bank, and a thick glob of brown clay was clinging to the pristine alligator leather of his left shoe. He looked down at it with disgusted eyes. Then he looked at me. "You caddy," Volkov grunted, his voice deep and gravelly. "Clean this." I froze. For a second, the Undertaker wanted to drive the 7-iron into his knee, but Earl the caddy just nodded submissively. I reached for the towel hanging from the bag. "No." Trenton's voice cut through the air, sharp and high-pitched. He had recognized me. He was staring at me, his eyes wide with shock, then slowly narrowing into a look of pure, venomous delight. He stepped forward, pushing my hand away from the towel. "Do not use the towel," he said. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "This man is a professional. He knows how to get down on his knees." "Don't you, Leo?" Volkov looked at Trenton, confused. "You know this old man?" "Know him," Trenton laughed. It was a jagged, nervous sound. "He is my father-in-law, the barber I told you about. The one who lost everything." Volkov's expression changed from indifference to amusement. He looked at me like I was a zoo animal. "A barber," he rumbled. "And now he carries bags. How the mighty have fallen." "He is not mighty," Trenton spat. "He is nothing. He is the dirt on your shoe, Dmitry. And that is exactly what he is going to clean. Not with a towel, with his hands. Make him do it. It will teach him respect." I looked at Trenton. He was trembling, not with fear, but with the adrenaline of power. He wanted to show the Russian that he dominated everything in his orbit, even his own family. He wanted to strip away the last shred of my dignity in front of his master. "Get on your knees," Leo Trenton commanded, pointing at the muddy shoe. "Show Mr. Volkov that you are good for something." I looked at the ground. The mud was wet, dark, and foul-smelling. I looked at Volkov, who was waiting arms crossed, expecting obedience. I looked at Trenton, who was practically vibrating with malice. If I refused, I would be fired immediately, thrown off the course, and the mission would fail. We would lose the location of the accounts. The missiles would fly. The money would disappear. I had to make a choice. My pride or the mission. I slowly lowered myself to one damn knee. The wet grass soaked through the thin fabric of the jumpsuit. I kept my head bowed, hiding the fire in my eyes. "Good boy," Trenton sneered. "Use your fingers, Leo. Get in there." I reached out with my bare hand, grabbing the muddy sole of the Russian's shoe. The leather was cold. The mud was slimy, sticking to my skin like shame. I began to scrape it away. I could hear Trenton breathing heavily above me, enjoying every second of this. He was filming it. I could see the reflection of his phone screen in the shiny tip of the shoe. He was recording his victory, but he was not watching my other hand, while my right hand scraped the mud, acting the part of the broken servant. My left hand was moving with the precision of a surgeon. I reached into my pocket, palming the roll of athletic tape. I slid my thumb inside, popping the tiny black microchip into the crease of my palm. I moved my left hand to stabilize, Volkov's ankle giving the appearance of being thorough. "I am sorry, sir," I mumbled, playing up the old man tremor. "Let me get the hem of your pants. It is dirty too." I brushed my hand against the cuff of his expensive trousers. With a flick of my thumb, I pressed the microchip into the inner seam of the hem. The device had a microscopic hook fabric fastener meant to latch onto fiber instantly. It bit into the fabric and held. I pulled my hand back, leaving the bug secure. It was done. The ear was in place. I finished cleaning the shoe, wiping the last of the mud onto my own sleeve. I looked up. Volkov was not even looking at me. He was looking at the fairway, calculating his next shot. To him, I was furniture. I was a tool that cleaned itself. I stood up, my knees cracking loudly. My hands were covered in filth. My jumpsuit was stained. But the weight in my chest was gone, replaced by the cold satisfaction of success. That is better. Volkov grunted. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single dirty quarter, tossing it onto the grass at my feet. "For your trouble, old man," Trenton roared with laughter, clapping Volkov on the back. "Perfect, Dmitri. Perfect. Pick it up, Leo. You need every cent, right?" I looked at the quarter in the grass. I did not pick it up. I looked Trenton dead in the eye. For a second, just a fraction of a second, his laughter faltered. He saw something in my face that he did not understand. He saw the look of a man who had just tightened the noose. "You missed your calling, Trenton," I said quietly. "You should have been a shoe salesman. You have a talent for looking at feet." Trenton, his face flushed red. "Get back to the cart," he snapped. "Walk home. We do not need you for the back nine." I nodded, turning away. I walked toward the clubhouse, leaving the bag, leaving the quarter, and leaving the two men alone on the green. As I walked, I reached into my ear and tapped the tiny receiver hidden there. The static cleared, and suddenly I heard Volkov's voice crystal clear, as if he were standing next to me. "Hi is pathetic. Your father-in-law," Volkov was saying. "He is an insect," Trenton replied. "But forget him, he did the transfer clear." "It clears tonight," Volkov said. "The pilot leaves at 9 p.m. The account codes are in the briefcase. Do not lose it, Trenton, or you will be cleaning my shoes with your tongue." I smiled, walking past the clubhouse security. The humiliation washed off with a little soap and water. But the recording I was capturing, that was permanent. I walked out of the gates of Emerald Hills, not as a caddy, but as the hunter who had just tagged the beast, and tonight, the beast was leading me straight to the slaughterhouse. The neon sign of the Starlight Motel buzzed outside my window, flashing pink and black in a rhythm that would drive a normal man insane, but I was not a normal man. I was a ghost, haunting a room that smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon pledge. I had chosen this motel specifically because it was off the grid, cash only, and the walls were thin enough that I could hear a footstep. 3 doors down, I sat in the dark on the edge of the sagging mattress, stripping the insulation off a copper lamp cord with my teeth. My hands were steady. My breathing was slow, controlled deep from the diaphragm. The fear I had seen in Julia's eyes earlier that day had fueled me, but now that fuel was burning clean, converting into cold, hard preparation. Trenton was predictable. He was a man who solved problems with money, and when money failed, he solved them with violence. But he was corporate violent. He hired resumes, not people. He would have called a private security contractor, likely a firm staffed by former special forces who had washed out for being too aggressive or too unstable. He would have paid a premium for a wet work team to come in and make it look like a robbery gone wrong. An old man killed for his watch in a bad neighborhood. Simple, clean-closed case. I looked at the clock radio, 2:14 a.m., the witching hour. Tactical teams love this time because deep sleep cycles are at their peak, causing reaction times to lag. But I had not slept in 24 hours. I was running on adrenaline and decades of muscle memory. I stood up and walked to the bathroom. I took the thick, scratchy motel towel and soaked it in the sink, wringing it out just enough so it was heavy, but not dripping. A wet towel is an old locker room joke to most men, but in the hands of a trained operative it is a flexible bludgeon capable of generating enough tip velocity to break skin or wrap around a weapon wound. I draped it over my shoulder. Next, I took the travel-size can of shaving foam and sprayed a circle on the floor right in front of the door, masking the puddle of water I had poured there. Then I laid the stripped copper wire into the water, running the cord back to the outlet near the bed. But I did not plug it in yet. The trap was set. I heard them before I saw them. The sound of a heavy boot rolling on the gravel outside, delicately trying to be silent. There were 3 of them, I could tell by the distribution of weight. On the wooden walkway outside, 2 heavy steps, 1 lighter. The point man, the muscle, and the leader. The lock on the door clicked softly. A pick gun, electronic, fast, efficient. The door handle turned slowly. I waited in the corner of the room, sitting in the armchair, my silhouette blending with the shadows. The door swung open, revealing the silhouette of the point man. He was wearing tactical black, holding a suppressed pistol. He stepped into the room, scanning left, then right. He took 1 step forward. His boot landed in the shaving foam and water. I plugged the cord into the wall. The pop was loud, like a firecracker snapping. The circuit completed through the water and up into the man's leg. He convulsed, his muscles seizing instantly, the gun dropping from his hand as he collapsed, twitching onto the carpet, smelling of ozone and burnt rubber. I yanked the cord out, killing the power before the fuse blew. The second man, the muscle, rushed in over his fallen comrade. He was big, wide-shouldered, moving with the momentum of a linebacker. He saw me in the chair and raised his weapon. I stood up, snapping the wet towel with my right hand. It cracked through the air faster than his eye could track. The heavy, wet tip struck his wrist with the force of a baton. The bone snapped, audible in the small room. He screamed, dropping the gun, but he was disciplined. He didn't retreat. He charged, trying to tackle me. I didn't fight his strength, I used it. I stepped aside, pivoting on my left foot like a matador. The towel was still in my hand. I whipped it around his neck as he stumbled past me, catching the momentum. I pulled tight, crossing my wrists and dropping my weight, using his own forward motion to strangle him. He clawed at the towel, tearing at the fabric. But wet cotton doesn't give. He gagged his face, turning red, then purple. I held the choke for 6 seconds, exactly long enough to cut off the blood flow to the brain, but not long enough to kill him. Permanent damage wasn't the goal yet. Slow was he went, limp, a heavy sack of meat sliding to the floor, 2 down, 10 seconds elapsed. The third man, the leader, did not rush in. He was a pro. He stayed in the doorway, using the frame as cover. His weapon trained on the darkness. He had seen his team dismantle in seconds, and he knew he was not dealing with a barber. "Come out, old man," he whispered, his voice calm, controlled. "Or I start shooting through the walls." I crouched behind the bed, moving silently to the other side of the room. I picked up the straight razor I had placed on the nightstand. It was a vintage Parker with a carbon steel blade honed to a molecular edge. It was the only tool I had saved from my kit, besides the Glock. But tonight, I wanted to be intimate. I wanted them to know who beat them. I picked up the heavy glass ashtray from the table and threw it at the window on the far side of the room. Smash. The leader turned his head instinctively, tracking the sound toward the window. It was a rookie mistake, a momentary lapse in discipline, but it was all I needed. I launched myself from the darkness, closing the distance in 2 strides. I didn't go for the gun, I went for the arm. I chopped down on his forearm with the edge of my hand, striking the radial nerve. His hand went numb, the gun clattering to the floor. He spun around, driving a knee into my stomach. It hit hard, knocking the wind out of me. I stumbled back, tasting bile. I was 69 years old, and my body wasn't made for absorbing kinetic energy like this anymore. My ribs screamed in protest. He followed up with a left hook that caught me on the cheekbone. Bright stars exploding in my vision. He was faster than me. He backed me against the wall, his hand reaching for a knife on his belt. "You are dead, Grandpa." He grunted, lunging. I didn't try to block. I ducked, slipping under his guard, grabbing his belt and using my hip as a fulcrum. I executed a hip toss, a judo move I had learned at the academy 40 years ago. Gravity did the rest. He flew over my shoulder, slamming onto the floorboards with a bone-rattling thud. Before he could recover, I was on top of him. My knee pinned his gun arm to the floor, the straight razor flicked open in my hand, gleaming in the neon light. Form outside, I pressed the cold steel blade against his throat, right over the carotid artery. He froze. His eyes went wide, realizing that 1 millimeter of pressure would end his life. "Don't move," I whispered. My voice was raspy, breathless, but steady. The blade hummed against his skin, trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from the rage I was holding back. "Who sent you?" He stayed silent, staring up at me with defiant eyes. He was trained to resist interrogation. But he was trained to resist military interrogation, not a barber with a razor. I adjusted my grip. "I am going to give you a shave, son, Los." "Very close." I nicked the skin. A tiny bead of blood welled up. "Trenton Dillard," I hissed. "Say the name." He grit his teeth. "I don't know any Dillard." I pressed harder. The blood trickled down his neck, staining his tactical collar. "You are lying. The money transfer cleared 2 hours ago. He paid you half up front, half upon completion. Am I right?" His eyes flickered. "How did you know that?" "I know everything." I leaned in close, my face inches from his. "I know about the offshore accounts. I know about the missiles, and I know that you are just a line item in his expense report. He doesn't care if you live or die. But I do, I care very much." I pulled the cell phone from my pocket with my free hand hitting the record button. "Tell me who hired you, and you walk out of here. Refuse and I open you up like a zipper." He looked at the razor, then at the 2 unconscious men on the floor, then back at my eyes. He saw the abyss there. He saw that I was not bluffing. "Dillard," he gasped. "It was Dillard. He contacted the firm yesterday. He said he wanted a cleanup, loose ends, and the target," I prompted, moving the phone closer. "Leonard Graves, the barber," he said. "Make it look like a robbery, and the payment. 50,000 crypto." I stopped the recording. I closed the razor with a snap and stood up, stepping back. He scrambled backward, clutching his throat, looking at me with pure terror. "You are not a barber. Who are you?" I looked down at him, wiping the small spot of blood from the blade onto my pant leg. I am the guy who just canceled your contract. I pointed to the door. Get your men and get out. Tell your boss that he wasted his money, and tell Dillard that he missed. The leader scrambled to his feet, helping the wet, groggy muscle man up, while the point man groaned on the floor, smelling of burnt hair. They stumbled out of the room, dragging their equipment, looking back at me one last time as if checking to see if I was real or a hallucination. I locked the door and slid the chain into place. I sank onto the bed, my chest heaving. My ribs were on fire, my face was throbbing, and my hands were shaking from the adrenaline dump. I looked at the phone in my hand. The recording was saved. The confession was clear. Trenton had tried to use a hammer to kill a fly. He didn't realize the fly was armed with a razor and a lifetime of violence. I went to the sink and splashed cold water on my face, washing away the sweat and the blood. I looked in the mirror. The old man was looking back at me, but the eyes were different. The eyes were victorious. I picked up the phone and sent the audio file to the secure server at the bureau. Then I sent a text to Julia, just one word: safe. I packed my bag. I couldn't stay here. Not after this, but I wasn't running anymore. I was advancing. The pawns were off the board. It was time to go after the king. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was transformed into a cathedral of ego, where 500 of the state's most influential people gathered to worship at the altar of Trenton Dillard. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and money, and the hum of conversation was a low roar of self-congratulation. I walked up the red carpet, not as a guest, but as a specter. My suit was the charcoal one I had worn to my wife's funeral 10 years ago. It was frayed at the cuffs and tight across the shoulders, and it smelled faintly of the smoke that had consumed my barbershop. The bruise on my cheekbone from the motel fight was turning a sickly shade of yellow and green, concealed poorly by the dim streetlights outside, but under the harsh glare of the paparazzi flashes. It stood out like a beacon of violence. Security intercepted me before I even reached the revolving doors. 2 men in black suits with earpieces and necks the size of tree trunks stepped in front of me, blocking my path like a human wall. One of them placed a heavy hand on my chest, not shoving me but holding me in place with immovable force. "Sir, you are at the wrong venue," the guard said, his voice flat and professional. "The soup kitchen is 3 blocks over. This is a private event." I did not look at him. I looked past him through the glass doors to the stage where Trenton was standing, holding a crystal champagne flute, basking in the adoration of the crowd. "I have an invitation," I said calmly, reaching into my pocket. The guard did not even look at the crumpled paper I pulled out. He just shook his head, grabbing my arm tight enough to cut off circulation. "We have been warned about a disturbance, sir. You need to leave the premises immediately, or we will physically remove you." I let my shoulders slump, feigning defeat. I let out a shaky breath, playing the part of the confused old man slipping into dementia. "Please, I just want to see my daughter," I wheezed. My voice was raspy, perfect for the role. The guard began to drag me away, turning me back toward the street. The cameras flashed, capturing the moment. The wealthy elite inside turned to watch the commotion through the glass, sipping their drinks, entertained by the spectacle of poverty being scrubbed from their view. "Wait." The voice was amplified, booming through the outdoor speakers. Trenton had seen me. He had seen the cameras. He saw an opportunity, not a threat. The doors swung open and Trenton Dillard walked out onto the steps, flanked by his publicist and Julia. Julia looked pale, her eyes red-rimmed, but she was standing straight, holding her clutch with a white-knuckled grip. She saw me, and for a second her eyes widened in fear, but I gave her the slightest nod, a micro-gesture barely visible. Then she looked away, staring at the ground. "Let him go," Trenton commanded, walking down the steps with his arms spread wide like a benevolent savior. The guards released me, stepping back, confused. "Mr. Dillard, this man is on the exclusion list. It is okay," Trenton said loud enough for the reporters to hear. He turned to the cameras, flashing his $1 million smile. Ladies and gentlemen, please forgive the interruption. This is Leonard Graves, my father-in-law. He has been struggling lately. He walked over to me, stopping just out of arm's reach, careful not to let his tuxedo touch my ruined suit. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt that was so perfectly rehearsed it deserved an Oscar. I told security to keep him out for his own safety. Trenton continued, his voice dropping to a somber tone meant to evoke sympathy. He has been confused since the fire wandering the streets. We tried to get him help, but he refuses. The dementia is aggressive. The crowd murmured softly. Tragedy and wealth mixing in a cocktail of voyeurism, but I cannot turn him away, Trenton declared, placing a hand on his heart. This gala is about charity, isn't it? It is about helping those who cannot help themselves. If I cannot show compassion to my own troubled family member, how can I ask you to support the Dillard Foundation? He gestured to the guards. Let him in, give him a seat in the back, get him some water and maybe a plate of food. He looks like he hasn't eaten in days. The guards nodded, stepping aside. The reporters scribbled furiously, eating up the narrative of the saintly son-in-law, caring for the broken senile patriarch. Trenton had turned my intrusion into a PR victory. He had weaponized my presence to polish his halo. Thank you. Trenton, I whispered, letting my voice tremble. I just wanted to be here. Trenton leaned in close under the guise of giving me a hug. His grip was hard, digging into my bruised ribs. You are lucky the cameras are rolling. Old man, he hissed into my ear. You sit in the back and you shut your mouth. If you make a scene, I will have you committed tonight. The papers are already signed. He pulled back, patting my shoulder, smiling for the flashbulbs. Enjoy the food. Leo. It is the last decent meal you will ever have. I walked past him up the stairs and into the ballroom. The heat of the room hit me. The noise was deafening. I walked through the sea of tuxedos and gowns, feeling the eyes of the city's elite burning into my back. They looked at me with disgust, masked as pity. They saw a charity case, they saw a prop. I found a chair in the back corner near the audio-visual control booth, exactly where I needed to be. I sat down, keeping my head low, clutching my hands in my lap to hide the tremors not from age but from the sheer force of will it took not to draw my weapon right then and there. Trenton returned to the stage, the applause thunderous. He stood behind the podium, looking out at his kingdom. He looked at the teleprompter, ready to give the speech that would launch his political career. He looked at the investors, ready to sign over their fortunes. He looked at Julia, who was standing by his side like a trophy. And then he looked at me. In the back of the room, a small gray smudge in his perfect world. He smiled a genuine smile of triumph. He thought he had won. He thought he had neutralized the threat by embracing it. But he did not know that the senile old man sitting near the soundboard wasn't looking at the food. He was looking at the time. I checked my watch, 8:58 p.m., 2 minutes until the satellite uplink was secure. 2 minutes until the FBI director patched through. 2 minutes until the world found out that the man on stage wasn't a savior, but a monster. And I was the only one in the room who knew that the floor was about to drop out from under him. I poured a glass of water, my hand steady now. The trembling was gone. I took a sip, watching Trenton raise his hands to silence the crowd ready to begin his speech. Go ahead, kid, I thought. Speak up. Make sure everyone is listening because you are going to want an audience for what comes next. Trenton Dillard stood at the podium bathed in a warm golden spotlight that made him look like a statuette, an idol of commerce and morality. He paused for effect, letting the silence hang in the air before delivering his closing remarks. Transparency, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that echoed perfectly through the high-fidelity speakers. Transparency is not just a buzzword for us at the Dillard Foundation. It is a lifestyle. It is a promise that we hide nothing, that every dollar is accounted for, and that our hands are clean. The crowd ate it up. Men in $5,000 tuxedos nodded solemnly, and women wiped tears from their eyes, moved by the performance of a sociopath. I sat in the shadows of the back row near the sound booth and watched the deception unfold with the cold detachment of a sniper waiting for the wind to die down. My hand rested on my phone hidden beneath a cocktail napkin. The screen showed a progress bar uploading the payload I had extracted from the courier. Intercept. Earlier that day, 98%, 99%. Trenton smiled that perfect capped tooth smile that had charmed investors and fooled my daughter for years. My father-in-law sits back there tonight. He continued, gesturing vaguely toward the darkness where I sat. He taught me the value of hard work, of earning every penny honestly. And though his mind is failing him now, his lessons remain the bedrock of this company. So tonight, I dedicate this transparency initiative to you. Leo. The audience turned, craning their necks, trying to spot the poor, senile Barber in the back. I did not shrink away. I did not hide. I sat perfectly still, my eyes locked on the massive LED screen behind Trenton, waiting for the digital handshake to complete upload. Complete. I pressed the execute button on my screen. It was a simple movement, a tap of a thumb, no harder than liking a photo on social media, but it carried the weight of a gavel striking a bench. The change happened instantly. The warm, ambient music that had been playing softly underneath Trenton's speech cut out with a violent digital screech that made half the room cover their ears. Trenton flinched, looking around, confused, assuming it was technical incompetence. "Is the audio guy asleep back there?" Trenton joked, trying to recover the moment, aiming for a laugh. But nobody laughed. A woman in the front row, the wife of a senator, gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth, and she pointed a shaking finger at the stage, not at Trenton, but behind him. Trenton turned slowly, following her gaze. The massive screen, which a moment ago had displayed the benevolent logo of the Dillard Foundation, was now a wall of static. Then the static cleared, replaced by a stark, high-contrast image that seared itself into the retinas of everyone in the room. It was not a graph, it was not a photo. It was the seal of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, towering 20 feet high, rotating slowly in ominous blue and gold. Below the seal, in bold red letters that pulsed like a heartbeat, were the words, "Federal Arrest Warrant Issued, Richo Predicate 429. The room went silent, a silence so absolute you could hear the ice melting in the glasses. It was the silence of a collective intake of breath, the realization that the party was over. Trenton stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. He looked small against the backdrop of federal authority. "This is a mistake," he stammered, his voice cracking high and panicked. "Someone cut the feed. We are being hacked. Security cut the power." But the power did not cut. The audio system crackled again, not with feedback this time, but with the distinct sound of a phone line connecting. The ringing tone blasted through the concert hall speakers, amplified to a deafening volume, calling out to the conscience of every criminal in the room. Trenton backed away from the podium, as if the microphone were a snake. It rang once, it rang twice, then the line clicked open. The voice that filled the room was not robotic. It was human gravelly and carried the undeniable weight of command. It was a voice I had heard giving orders in war zones and briefing rooms for 30 years. "This is Assistant Director Hartman of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." The name hit the room like a physical shockwave. Hartman was a legend, a ghost story that white-collar criminals told each other to keep themselves up at night. Trenton looked at the ceiling, looked at the booth, looked anywhere for an escape route. "Who is this?" he shouted, trying to regain control. "This is a private event. You are violating federal laws by hacking this system. I am not hacking anything, Mr. Dillard." Hartman's voice boomed, calm and terrifyingly amused. "I am speaking through a priority channel authorized by the Patriot Act, and I am doing so to execute a warrant for the arrest of Trenton Dillard on charges of money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy to traffic military-grade armaments." A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd. The senator in the front row stood up and began to briskly walk toward the exit, followed immediately by his wife. The rats were sensing the sinking ship. "That is a lie!" Trenton screamed, losing his composure entirely. Sweat glistening on his forehead. "My funds are clean. My father-in-law, he is doing this. He is crazy. He is a senile old barber with a grudge." There was a pause on the line, a silence that felt heavy. "A barber?" Hartman repeated the word, dripping with irony. "Is that what you think he is?" The screen behind Trenton changed again. The FBI seal shrank, moving to the corner, and a new window opened. It was a personnel file redacted in black ink, but the photo was clear. It was a younger version of me wearing tactical gear standing on the tarmac of an airfield in Colombia, holding an assault rifle. Next to the photo was a code name, The Undertaker. Trenton turned and saw the photo. He looked at the screen. Then he looked into the darkness at the back of the room. "Searching for me, Mr. Dillard." Hartman continued, his voice devoid of mercy. "You are currently under the surveillance of Special Agent Leonard Graves, a man who has dismantled cartels that would eat your little hedge fund for breakfast. You didn't marry into a family of victims. You married into the wolf's den, and you just poked the alpha." All eyes in the room, 500 pairs of them, turned to me. I stood up slowly. I buttoned my jacket, covering the handle of the Glock. 19 tucked into my waistband. I did not look at the crowd. I looked only at Trenton. He was shaking now, visibly, trembling on stage. The arrogance, the confidence, the polished veneer of the successful businessman had evaporated, leaving behind a terrified child caught in a game he never understood. "Leo," he whispered, his voice picked up by the microphone, barely audible. "No. You are just a barber. You cut hair." I walked out from behind the chair, moving into the center aisle. The crowd parted for me instinctively, backing away as if I were radioactive. Or perhaps they just recognized the predator walking among them. "I am not a barber, Trenton," I said, my voice unamplified but carrying clearly in the dead silence. "I am the guy they call when the law isn't enough. And tonight, I am the guy who is canceling your account." Trenton looked at Volkov, the Russian mobster sitting at the VIP table begging for help with his eyes. But Volkov was already on his phone speaking rapidly in Russian, signaling his team to abort. The Russian knew what that file on the screen meant. He knew that the Undertaker didn't leave loose ends. Hartman's voice came over the speakers one last time. "Special Agent Graves. The perimeter is secure. SWAT is 2 minutes out. The floor is yours." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my badge, flipping it open. The gold shield caught the light, reflecting the same authority as the giant screen. The visual confirmation was the final nail in the coffin. "Trenton Dillard," I said, walking toward the stage, step by step, enjoying the sound of his world crumbling. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it, because every word you have said for the last 5 years has been a lie, and I am done listening." The walk from the back of the ballroom to the stage was the longest walk of Trenton Dillard's life, but for me it felt like coming home. The crowd, which moments ago had been a solid wall of tuxedoed arrogance, parted like the Red Sea before Moses. They scrambled over each other, knocking over chairs and spilling drinks, desperate to get out of the path of the man they had just laughed at. I did not run, I did not rush, I walked with the heavy, measured gait of a man, carrying the weight of the law. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of my shoes on the polished parquet floor and the ragged, terrified breathing of my son. In-law amplified by the microphone he was still clutching like a lifeline. Trenton stood frozen, a deer caught in the headlights of a freight train. He looked at the giant screen behind him, where the FBI warrant still pulsed in red and blue. Then he looked at me. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a primal confusion. He could not reconcile the image of the old barber who swept hair for $5 with the federal agent walking toward him with a badge on his belt and a Glock at his hip. Call security. Trenton shrieked, his voice cracking, shattering the silence. Someone get these people out of here. I am a donor. I know the mayor. I stopped at the foot of the stairs leading to the stage. I looked up at him calmly. I am the security. Trenton, and the mayor is not going to take your call. Not tonight, not ever again. Suddenly, the sound of shattering glass exploded from above. It sounded like a thunderstorm trapped inside the room, high above the chandeliers. The skylights of the ballroom smashed inward, sending a cascade of glittering shards raining down onto the empty dance floor. Ropes dropped from the darkness, coiling down like black snakes. Go, go, go! The shout echoed from the ceiling, disciplined and aggressive. 6 figures clad in heavy tactical armor rappelled down their movements, synchronized and lethal. They hit the floor with a heavy thud, boots stomping on the expensive carpet. Weapons raised laser sights cutting through the dust and smoke. Red dots danced across the room, sweeping over the terrified guests before locking onto a single target. The man on the stage. EI, get down, get on the ground, now! The lead SWAT officer, a man whose face was hidden behind a ballistic mask, vaulted onto the stage, his rifle trained on Trenton's chest. Trenton stumbled back, tripping over his own feet and falling hard onto his backside. He scrambled backward like a crab, knocking over the podium. The microphone hit the floor with a deafening screech of feedback. Do not shoot, he screamed, throwing his hands up in a pathetic gesture of surrender. I am unarmed. I am a businessman. I have rights. I walked up the stairs slowly, stepping over the fallen podium. I nodded to the SWAT leader, signaling him to hold his fire. The team fanned out, securing the perimeter, their presence turning the charity gala into a crime scene in seconds. The guests were pressed against, the walls trembling, holding their hands up, and diamonds and gold watches gleaming under the harsh tactical lights. I stood over Trenton, looking down at him. He looked small, huddled on the floor. His expensive tuxedo ruined his hair a mess, sweat pouring down his face, melting his stage makeup. Leo, please, he whimpered, reaching out a shaking hand toward my pant leg. Tell them it is a misunderstanding. We can fix this. I have money. I have so much money I can set you up. You want the shop back? I will buy you 10 shops. I will buy you the whole block. Just tell them to put the guns down. I kicked his hand away, not hard, but with enough force to show him that his touch was contamination. I do not want your money, Trenton. I want your wrists. I reached behind my back and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. They were not the standard issue police cuffs. These were old, heavy steel, scratched from years of use. The same cuffs I had used to chain a cartel boss to a radiator in Juarez. The metal clinked ominously. Trenton, Dillard, I said. My voice steady, carrying to every corner of the silent room. You are under arrest for racketeering money, laundering, conspiracy to traffic, illegal arms, and domestic abuse. I grabbed his left wrist, twisting it behind his back. He yelped in pain, but I did not loosen my grip. I snapped the first cuff on, tightening it until it bit into the skin. You have the right to remain silent. I recited the Miranda warning, the words flowing automatically. A liturgy of justice. I suggest you use it because you have a habit of talking too much, especially when you think you are the smartest man in the room. I grabbed his other wrist, jerking it back to meet the first click. The sound of the lock engaging was the sweetest sound I had heard in 10 years. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I continued, hauling him to his feet. He was dead weight, his legs rubbery, unable to support him. I have lawyers, Trenton blubbered, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the snot. Running from his nose, I have the best lawyers in New York. They will have me out in an hour. You will see. This is false arrest harassment. I will sue you. I will sue the Bureau. I will own you. Leo, you have the right to an attorney, I said, spinning him around, so he faced the audience so he could see the 500 people watching his destruction. If you cannot afford one, one will be provided for you. I leaned in close, my face inches from his ear so only he could hear me. This was the moment, the payoff, the final twist of the knife that would hurt more than the prison sentence. "And speaking of affording things, Trenton," I whispered, "do not bother calling your Cayman bankers." Trenton froze his sobbing, stopping instantly. He turned his head, trying to look at me, his eyes wide with a new kind of horror. "What did you say?" he breathed. "I know about the Blue Horizon account," I whispered, holding him tight. "The 300 million you were trying to move tonight. The money from the missiles." He shook his head frantically. "No! You cannot touch that. It is encrypted. It is offshore. It is untouchable." I smiled, a cold, hard expression that never reached my eyes. "I am the Undertaker, Trenton. I bury things, but sometimes I dig them up. 10 minutes ago, while you were standing at that podium, giving your speech about transparency, I authorized a seizure order. The Cayman authorities cooperated immediately once we sent them the recording from the golf course. Your accounts are frozen. The assets are being repatriated to the U.S. Treasury as we speak." Trenton's face turned a color I had never seen on a human being before, a gray, ashen white like wet concrete. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The prison time he could handle, the shame he could spin, but the money. The money was his god, and I had just killed it. "You are broke," I whispered, finalizing the destruction. "Your house, your cars, your hedge fund. It is all gone, seized as proceeds of crime. You are not a millionaire anymore. You are just a pauper in a rented tuxedo going to a cage." A guttural scream ripped from his throat. A sound of pure animalistic despair. He lunged, trying to headbutt me, trying to hurt me, trying to do anything to stop the reality crashing down on him. But I was ready. I sidestepped his clumsy attack and swept his legs out from under him. He hit the stage floor face first with a sickening thud. The SWAT team moved in instantly, grabbing him by the arms and hauling him up, dragging him toward the exit. I watched him go, his heels dragging across the floor, screaming obscenities, screaming about his lawyers, screaming until his voice broke. The room was silent again. The guests stared at me, fear and awe in their eyes. I adjusted my cuffs and looked down at Julia. She was standing by the edge of the stage, tears running down her face, but they were not tears of sadness. She nodded at me, a slow, deliberate nod, then she turned and walked away, not following her husband, but walking toward the exit on her own terms, free for the first time in years. I looked at the camera crews who were still filming, stunned into silence. I looked directly into the lens, addressing the millions of people watching at home. "My name is Special Agent Leonard Graves," I said, my voice echoing in the hall. "And the Dillard Foundation is officially closed for business." I turned and walked off the stage, leaving the spotlight behind, walking back into the shadows where I belonged. The job was done, the target was neutralized, and the barber from the Bronx had just given the closest shave of his life. The interrogation room at the federal building is designed to strip a man of his soul. It is a box of concrete and stainless steel, kept at a temperature of 62 degrees, just cold enough to make a suspect shiver, just uncomfortable enough to prevent sleep. The lighting is harsh, fluorescent buzzing, with a low-frequency hum that grates on the nerves. After an hour, for Trenton Dillard, who had spent his life in corner offices with ergonomic chairs and climate control, this room was not just a cell, it was an alien planet. I stood behind the two-way mirror watching him. He was slumped in the metal chair, his tuxedo jacket discarded on the floor, his expensive shirt unbuttoned at the collar, stained with sweat and the residue of his panic. He was not screaming anymore. He was staring at the wall, muttering to himself, calculating, trying to find the angle, the loophole, the bribe that would make this nightmare end. I opened the heavy steel door and stepped inside. The sound of the latch clicking shut was loud. In the small space, Trenton's head snapped up. When he saw me, a flicker of hope ignited in his eyes. It was pathetic. He still thought he could manipulate me. He still thought I was Leo the barber, not Agent Graves. Leo, he breathed, sitting up straighter, attempting to compose himself. Thank God. Look, you have had your fun. You scared me, okay? You proved your point. Now let us stop this madness before it goes too far. I pulled out the metal chair opposite him and sat down slowly, placing a thick file folder on the table between us. I did not speak, I just looked at him, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of the situation settle on his shoulders. Trenton leaned forward, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Think about Julia. Leo, you are destroying her life by doing this. She relies on me. I am the provider. If I go to prison, she loses everything. The house, the cars, the status. She is fragile. Leo, you know she is fragile. She will not survive the scandal. She will crumble without me. I stared at him, marveling at the depth of his delusion. He truly believed that his abuse was a form of protection. He believed that without his controlling grip, Julia would cease to exist. You are right. Trenton, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. Julia was fragile. You made sure of that. You kept her medicated. You kept her afraid. You isolated her from her friends and her family so that you were the only reality she knew. I did it for her, Trenton insisted, his face flushing red. She is unstable. She needs structure. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a tablet. I placed it on the table facing him. You kept her in a cage. Trenton, but you forgot one thing about cages. Eventually, the bird learns how to pick the lock. I tapped the screen. A video file opened. It was a live feed from a safe house in Virginia. The room on the screen was simple, warm, filled with sunlight. Julia was sitting on a couch wrapped in a blanket, holding a cup of tea. She was not crying. She was not shaking. She looked tired. Yes. But there was a peace in her eyes that I had not seen in 10 years. Trenton stared at the screen, his mouth open in disbelief. Where is she? He demanded. You kidnapped her. That is a federal crime, Leo. She is in protective custody, I corrected. And she is not there as a prisoner. She is there as a cooperating witness, Trenton laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound, a witness. Julia, please. She does not know anything about the business. I never told her anything. She thinks I sell insurance. I swiped the screen, bringing up a new image. It was a photo of a heavy steel safe hidden behind a false wall in Trenton's home office. The door of the safe was open, revealing empty shelves. We raided your home an hour ago, Trenton. We found the safe, the one you claimed didn't exist, the one that held the physical ledgers for the Cayman accounts, and the hard drives with the names of your cartel partners. Trenton's face went white. He shook his head frantically. No. That is impossible. That safe is biometric, and it has a 20-digit alphanumeric backup code. Nobody has that code. Only me. Not even my partners have it. You could not have opened it. You are bluffing. I leaned in close, resting my elbows on the cold table. You are arrogant, Trenton. You thought Julia was stupid. You thought she was just a piece of furniture in your house, unaware of the world around her. But while you were drinking scotch and bragging on the phone while you were typing that code into the keypad every night. She was watching. I tapped the tablet again, playing a short audio clip. It was Julia S.'s voice, clear and steady. The code is TDKING1985MONEYGO, she recited on the recording. Trenton flinched as if he had been slapped. That was his code. A combination of his initials, his birth year, and his delusions of grandeur. King Money. God. It was the password of a narcissist. She memorized it. Trenton, I said softly, she memorized it 3 years ago. She watched you type it in the reflection of the window. She practiced it in her head. Every single day, waiting for the moment she would be brave enough to use it. Trenton slumped back in his chair, the fight draining out of him, looking like a puppet whose strings had been cut. She gave you the code, he whispered, horror dawning on him. She gave you everything. She gave us the code, the ledgers, and the encryption keys for the offshore accounts, I confirmed. She is not weak, Trenton. She played the long game better than you did. You thought you were the jailer. But you were just the prisoner of your own ego, and Julia, she is the one who slammed the door on you. Trenton looked at the video feed again, at his wife sipping tea in a room he could not reach. Tears of rage and self-pity streaming down his face. He realized then that he hadn't just lost his money. He had been defeated by the very person he deemed most insignificant. I stood up, picking up the tablet. "You have a long night ahead of you, Trenton," I said, walking to the door. "The forensic accountants are coming in next, and after them, the cartel lawyers will probably want a word about why their money is gone. Enjoy the silence while it lasts." I stepped out of the room and let the heavy steel door slam shut, sealing him in with his ghosts. The sound of the lock engaging was final, absolute. The manipulation was over. The emotional blackmail had failed Trenton. Dillard was alone, and for the first time in his life, there was no one left to blame but himself. 6 months is a long time. In the city, seasons change. Politicians change and buildings rise and fall like the tides. The corner of 42nd Street looks different now. The charred skeleton of my old life has been cleared away, and in its place stands a new structure. It is not a glass tower or a monument to vanity. It is a simple brick building, sturdy and unpretentious, built to withstand the wind, the rain, and the fire. The sign above the door is hand-painted, just like the old one. Leonard Graves, Barber Shop. But the glass in the window is 2 inches of reinforced polycarbonate, and the doorframe is steel. Some habits from the old life are hard to break, and I believe in being prepared. I unlocked the front door, flipping the sign from closed to open. The smell inside is fresh, a mixture of new pine wood, fresh paint, and the timeless scent of bay rum aftershave. The morning sun cuts across the floorboards, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It is quiet here. The kind of quiet that you earn, the kind of quiet that comes after the war is won and the enemies are buried. I spent the morning organizing my station. My scissors are lined up by size gleaming under the lights. My straight razors are honed to a molecular edge, ready for work. I took a moment to look at the framed photo on the wall. It is a new print of Julia and her mother, taken during a summer vacation in Maine 20 years ago. Next to it is a postcard I received yesterday from Vermont. It is a painting of a mountain landscape vibrant with greens and blues on the back. In Julia's handwriting are just 3 words, "I am free." I smiled, wiping a speck of dust from the frame. She is doing well. She is teaching art to kids living in a small cabin, far away from the noise of Wall Street and the shadow of Trenton Dillard. Last I heard, Trenton was adjusting poorly to life in a federal penitentiary. Apparently his cellmates were not impressed by his knowledge of hedge funds or his former connections to the mayor. Justice is a slow grinder, but it grinds exceedingly fine. The peace of the morning was interrupted by the roar of an engine outside. A black luxury sedan pulled up to the curb, parking directly in front of the fire hydrant, ignoring the red-painted curb. A driver jumped out to open the rear door, and a man stepped out. He was young, maybe 35, wearing a suit that cost more than my car, and holding a phone to his ear, screaming at some unfortunate assistant on the other end. He pushed the door open without looking up, marching into my shop like he owned the deed. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask if I had an appointment available. He just pointed at the chair while continuing his conversation. "Yeah, just buy the company and fire the board. I do not care about the pension fund, just liquidate it," he shouted into his phone, snapping his fingers at me to get my attention. I stood behind the counter cleaning a comb, watching him. He reminded me of Trenton, not in looks but in spirit. The same arrogance, the same belief that the world existed solely to serve him. He ended his call and tossed his phone onto the counter, right on top of my appointment book. "Hey, Pops," he said, checking his Rolex. "I have a lunch meeting with the city comptroller in 20 minutes. I need a trim and make it quick. I do not have all day to watch you shake." He walked over to the barber chair and sat down, kicking his feet up on the footrest. He looked at me in the mirror, expecting me to rush over, expecting me to be grateful for his patronage. He saw an old man in a smock. He saw a servant. I didn't move. I picked up a fresh towel and shook it out the fabric, making a sharp snap in the quiet room. I walked over to the chair, slowly, deliberately. I didn't look at his watch. I looked at his neck. "You know, this is a walk-in place, right?" he said, tapping his fingers on the armrest. "I usually go to a stylist in Soho, but my driver said, you were open. Chop chop, old-timer time is money." I stepped behind him, placing my hands on his shoulders. He flinched slightly, sensing something heavy in my grip, something that didn't match the gray hair and the wrinkles. I leaned in close, looking at his reflection in the mirror. He looked back, and for the first time, he really saw me. He saw the eyes that had stared down cartel bosses and corrupt politicians. He saw the stillness of a man who had walked through fire and came out the other side. His tapping fingers stopped. The arrogant smirk faded slightly. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice losing some of its bluster. I draped the towel around his neck, tucking it in tight, barely loose enough to breathe. I picked up my electric clippers, flipping the switch. The hum of the motor filled the room, steady and powerful. "Sit down," I said, my voice low and rough, like gravel crunching under a boot heel. I placed a hand on top of his head, tilting it forward, exposing the back of his neck. He tensed up, ready to argue, ready to throw his weight around, but something in the air stopped him. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Here is how this works, son," I whispered, leaning down so my words vibrated right against his ear. "You are in my house now, and in this house your bank account does not matter, your title does not matter, and who you know definitely does not matter." I held up the straight razor, letting the light catch the blade. "Sit down, go ahead and get comfortable, because here there are no chairmen or generals, there are only men and the truth, and do not make me upset because my razor is very sharp, looking back at the ashes of my old shop and the new life I built. I learned that power is not about the suit you wear or the money you steal. It is about character. Trenton thought he was a king because he stood on a stage, but he built his castle on a swamp of lies. I learned that true strength is silent. It does not need to shout or belittle others to feel important. And most importantly, I learned that while blood makes you relatives, it is loyalty that makes you family. I lost a son-in-law, but I got my daughter back, and that is a trade I would make 1,000 times over. Never let anyone define your worth by what you have in your pocket. Define it by what you carry in your heart and what you are willing to fight for. If you enjoyed seeing a humble barber take down a corrupt giant, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated by someone arrogant? I read every single story. See you in the next one.